Hi, I am Nejat Doğan from the Department of International Relations at Anadolu University, and I am one of the editors of your textbook, Introduction to International Relations. Welcome to the course, and thank you for your time. And today's topic is the study of international relations. However, I will not go into detail about your chapter, but I'll touch on some very critical points, and I would suggest you go to your book and read the chapter very closely. What this chapter talks about is the discipline of international relations, the levels of analysis in IR, some concepts underlying international relations, and some expanded issues in international relations, as well as the future of international relations as a discipline and also as the relations between states. Now, let's look at the scope and history of international relations. Your book, in fact, gives the details about the starting of international relations as a field of study in the early 20th century. In fact, the first IR studies started at Aberystwyth at the University of Wales, and also Georgetown University started a new program in international relations. And we see the London School of Economics giving a wide range of degrees in the field in early 1920s. And University of Chicago offered the first graduate degree in 1928. So this all tells you that in fact, international relations is a relatively new subject in the history of science, in the history of social science, I would say, but a very important one because international relations deals with the peace and stability at the systemic level. That's what we need nowadays, in fact. And your chapter goes into detail about the frameworks of IR because, as I said, there are a lot of concepts, issues, and ideas in the history of international relations. Your book gives you a framework to understand the field and relations among states. These are, in fact, the IR theories, level of analysis, principles of cooperation. And your book talks about some expanded issues such as human rights, responsibility to protect, humanitarian intervention, as well as environment. Now, the book gives a definition of international relations. In fact, it is the study of relations among nations, peoples, and states. However, international relations, in fact, focuses on a systemic understanding of how states behave. So the emphasis is on states rather than peoples and nations. Some people would say this is a misnomer, then why we call it international relations rather than interstate relations. However, as I said, we focus on a systemic understanding of how these states behave. As we said, states, let's look at some characteristics of states, such as it is a legal personality, it has a defined territory, states also have a permanent population and effective government. Then your book talks about some basic IR theories such as realism and liberalism. In fact, this will be the topic of our video in the third chapter. However, I would like you to give you some basics about these two theories. If you look at realism, its basic premises are that there is a world which is anarchical, which means there is no a higher authority over the states in the international system. Then this makes the system a self-help one. So what it means is that the nations should help themselves. They shouldn't expect help from other actors or other organizations in the international system. So power is crucial and very critical for survival. But the liberalism is a different story. It says even though the system is anarchical, cooperation is still possible, and states search for, in fact, long-term mutual gains rather than the short-term national gains. The book talks about three levels of analysis. What are these three levels? The individual, state, and systemic level. Why do we have these levels? Because it gives you a perspective to understand international relations. The individual level tries to understand how persons and their characteristics impact the policy. The state level looks at the structure and operations of a government. Systemic level looks at the organization of authority. If you look at the right side of the video, you see the pictures of Hitler and Mussolini. Why I gave this picture is that, let's say, if you try to define, if you give the reasons of the Second World War, you might explain this war at the individual, state, or systemic level. If you say the war occurred because of the leaders, then you have an individual level explanation. But if you say it was because of the operations of the German and Italian governments, then you have the state level explanation. But if you say no, this is because of the system, and the system is anarchical, then you have the state level, systemic level explanation. Then your book talks about the levels of analysis in international relations and look at the state systems. We have like 4 systems defined here: independent systems, hegemonic, imperial, and feudal systems. And there are some critical, very important concepts in your chapter. I would suggest you go and read the details of these concepts in your textbook. Let me touch on some of those. First of all, sovereignty, sovereign, nation, power, collective goods, cooperation, identity, alliances, NATO, which is North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the Warsaw Pact, coalitions, clash of civilizations, terrorism, political spectrum, power projection, the Cold War, Truman Doctrine, failed states and fragile states. These are critical concepts in the study of international relations, which we will go over and study these concepts in coming chapters. But you should also study these concepts because you will see them also at the midterm and final exams. And your book also talks about some expanded issues of international relations. These issues are expanded because we give you a framework to understand international relations, and we expand on this framework with the old and some emerging new concepts and new issues such as international law, ethics, international organization, ecology, the ecological framework, human rights, humanitarian assistance, responsibility to protect, intervention, and conflict. And your book closes with a discussion on the future of international relations. What kind of a world do you see in the next 20 to 30 years, in the next 50 years, or in the long run, let's say in the next 100 years? Some people are optimistic and some are very pessimistic. But I would say globalization draws a brighter picture, as well as it might drive you to a pessimistic view of international relations. And cosmopolitan and the humanitarian approaches see a brighter future, but the clash theories, of course, define a coming war between major states and major civilizations in the near future. And this wraps up our discussion on the study of international relations. Thank you for joining me. And the subject of the next video is the historical development of the international system. It gives you the basics about the working of the international system from a historical point of view. I hope you join me in that video, and by then you take care. Bye.